The repeated dreams that Ellen White said were urgent messages from God are not mere fragments of imagination, not shadows that vanish with the rising sun, but echoes that return again and again as if heaven itself refuses to be ignored. And so one must ask, why would the Almighty repeat a vision if not to engrave its warning deeper than memory? These dreams do not drift like ordinary whispers of the night. They cling, they pursue, they burn with insistence, as if eternity itself leans close to speak through the fragile veil of human sleep. And the question lingers, unsettling. What truth is so perilous, so urgent that silence could no longer contain it? Ellen White walked in a world saturated with voices, yet there were moments when a single voice rose above them all, striking with the weight of divine urgency. These repeated dreams were not suggestions, nor were they poetic meditations. They were commands clothed in imagery, symbols layered with meaning, visions stitched into her nights until her waking hours quivered with their fire. If dreams are the language of the unseen, then repetition is the exclamation of heaven, a thunder rolling until the heart trembles. And so the question gnaws. What was so critical that heaven had to insist again and again? The mind resists such possibilities, preferring to cage mysteries in explanations of chance or fatigue. Yet each repetition defies those fragile excuses. What mortals call coincidence, the Eternal calls revelation. Ellen White did not describe these dreams as trivial curiosities, but as warnings that time itself demanded to be heard, messages urgent enough to shake even the most stubborn soul. What if the very dream one discards as meaningless is in truth the rope thrown from heaven before the abyss swallows whole? What if neglect is more dangerous than ignorance itself? And here lies the deeper tension. These repeated dreams were not only for her, but for those who would live in times darker, faster, heavier, with deception. They pulse across the centuries, refusing to die, as if the ink of prophecy was not written on paper, but carved into the marrow of history itself. If Ellen White trembled under the weight of these visions, how much more should those who live now in a world collapsing under illusions take heed? Each unanswered question leads not to relief, but to a door half open, and behind it waits something one cannot yet name but already fears. This is why you cannot afford to look away, not for a moment, not for a breath, for every second holds a fragment of the puzzle that could shift everything you thought you knew. And before this journey unfolds, let the voice of prophecy guide not only the ear but the action. Subscribe to this channel, activate the bell, and leave your mark with a like, for it is through your presence here that these forgotten messages can continue to be unearthed and shared. Only then can the echoes of urgent dreams be kept alive, carried forward until their purpose is fully revealed. There are nights when silence is not silence, when the darkness itself trembles with a weight unseen, and dreams rise not as fleeting shadows but as burning brands pressed upon the soul. Ellen White knew this weight. She carried it in visions that returned like relentless waves, refusing to fade, refusing to let her rest. Can a dream be dismissed when it insists with such force? Or is its repetition a summons that binds the one who receives it to something greater than choice? The mind searches for escape, but escape is impossible when the voice of eternity has already spoken. She described how the dream would come once, twice, and again until the meaning pressed upon her with unbearable clarity. Not all messages are whispered gently. Some are struck like a hammer against stone until the stone itself shatters. And so, one wonders, what does heaven intend when it breaks the fragile walls of human forgetfulness through dreams that return like fire in the night? To ignore them is to deny not only the dream but the very urgency of the one who sent it. Each repeated vision carried the sense that time was short, that hesitation itself was a danger. What if delay is the greatest enemy of revelation? What if truth waits only for the obedient heart and closes itself to the one who shrugs with indifference? Ellen White trembled because she knew that to remain silent was to betray the message, and yet to speak was to disturb the comfortable illusions of those around her. Can comfort survive when truth demands to be heard? The repeated dreams were not sweet illusions but warnings painted with symbols, walls crumbling, storms gathering, lights extinguished. They pierced her with the realization that humanity stands always on the edge of decisions too heavy to ignore. The images she saw were not merely personal, they were cries of a world that did not wish to wake. And perhaps that is why repetition became necessary, because humanity loves sleep more than truth, illusion more than awakening. And if repetition was the method of God to break the spell, what does that say of us, who often resist even the first whisper? The returning dream becomes a mirror, showing how deaf we are to the single call, how blind we are to the first glimpse. Ellen White's visions were not hers to keep. They belonged to those who would later hear them if only they would listen before the echoes fade. Will the echo reach the heart of those who still close their ears? It is here that the story pierces more deeply. These dreams were not warnings about faraway strangers, but about those who claimed to know the truth, yet lived as though eternity were distant. Is this not the most dangerous deception of all? To believe one is safe while walking toward ruin? Ellen White's repeated dreams shook that illusion, tearing away the mask of false security. And even now, one must ask, could these warnings still be speaking to us today in a language we do not wish to hear? The human heart resists such confrontation, but resistance cannot erase what is urgent. Just as repetition cracks the stone, so too it cracks the excuses we hide behind. That is why the telling of these visions demands attention. Not the shallow glance of curiosity, but the deep gaze of one who knows their own soul may be reflected in them. Do you dare to look into such a mirror, or will you turn away before its truth is spoken? And if you feel this weight even now, if you sense that what you are hearing touches more than history, then do not let it pass in silence. Let your voice join in the comments. Let your presence here affirm that you too are awake, that you too resist the comfort of sleep. Every share of this story extends the echo. Every like strengthens the signal. Every subscription opens the way for more truths to rise from the shadows. For just as dreams repeated until heard, so these messages will continue only if there are hearts willing to carry them forward. The night returns with a weight that feels alive, pressing upon the chest, whispering questions that cannot be silenced. Ellen White's repeated dreams did not arrive gently. They demanded attention, demanded surrender. How is it possible to sleep when the soul itself is stirred awake by a fire that refuses to be contained? Each vision became a pulse, a rhythm of urgency that could not be ignored. And one must ask, what is it in these messages that insists on being heard? Over and over again, she saw shadows gather in the corners of human hearts, patterns of deception that stretched far beyond the simple errors of men. The dreams returned, each iteration more vivid, more insistent, until the line between sleep and waking blurred. Can you sense it? That space where reality bends, where the unseen presses in and whispers, "This is for you," and yet not only for you. Every symbol was a thread, a lifeline, an unseen path through a labyrinth of choices we think we control but do not. The visions spoke of danger. Not always distant, not always abstract. They crept close into homes, into decisions, into the quiet complacency that human beings mistake for peace. And still, repetition persisted, a hammer against the fragile mind, shaping the soul to recognize urgency. What would you do if you awoke to such insistence? If the dream refused to leave until it had your attention, your recognition, your obedience? Yet in their intensity, there was a strange comfort, a reminder that one is not alone in the struggle, that even amidst chaos there is a voice that watches, that guides, that insists. Ellen White felt the tension between fear and solace, between dread and understanding, and through that tension, she glimpsed the invisible patterns of providence. Can you feel it? That same pulse, that same tug toward insight that teeters between terror and awakening. The repetition itself became a teacher, a pattern impossible to ignore. Each return of the dream was not a mere echo but a layer, a revelation built upon revelation, demanding reflection and discernment. How easily we dismiss what repeats, thinking familiarity breeds comfort, when in truth it is insistence that carries truth. Do you recognize in your own life the moments that repeat, unheeded, yet persistent, trying to wake something deep within you? Ellen White's experiences were not solitary. They were mirrors to the human condition, warnings encoded in symbols and images that demanded attention. And if these dreams spoke to her so urgently, how much more are they speaking across time, reaching toward hearts today? Consider this. Each unanswered question in her visions is still unanswered in the human spirit, waiting for recognition, for courage, for action. Are we listening, or are we too comfortable in ignorance? As these layers unfold, notice the subtle pull, the way tension rises and falls like the tide, how questions linger long after the words are spoken. That is no accident. It is the design of the dream itself and of the story that must be told. Every heartbeat that quickens is a step deeper into the labyrinth of awareness, and each moment of recognition invites engagement. Comment what you feel. Share the reflections that stir within you. Let your own insight join this unfolding truth. And so, as the darkness presses and the repeated visions weigh heavier upon the mind, remember that attention is action. Every like, every share, every subscription is a vessel, carrying these urgent messages further, keeping the echoes alive. Even small gestures amplify the resonance of what is being revealed. The dreams insist, the world insists, and the question remains, will you respond to the call, or will you let it fade in silence? There is a tremor that runs beneath ordinary life, a subtle vibration that most do not notice until it becomes impossible to ignore. Ellen White's repeated dreams were the tremor made manifest, a force that broke the thin veil of everyday complacency. What is it in repetition that unsettles so profoundly, that awakens the hidden corridors of the mind where truths are buried under layers of habit and doubt? And when such visions press close, how does one respond? With denial, or with the courage to face the weight of what is revealed? The imagery in her dreams was not random. It was a language of warning, layered with meaning, designed to pierce both mind and soul. Walls crumbled, skies darkened, paths shifted, yet the symbols were never cruel without purpose. Each return of the dream demanded reflection, demanded awareness, demanded the willingness to see beyond what the eye could perceive. What might you discover if the repeated patterns in your own life were not coincidence, but calls from a reality unseen yet profoundly true? Fear mingled with revelation in her experiences, a tension that sharpened every perception. The repeated dreams were like hands pressing insistently against the chest, reminding her that time is short, that hesitation can cost more than mere opportunity. How often do we dismiss the urgent in favor of the familiar? How often do we turn from the mirror when it reflects too sharply upon the soul? The repetition was no accident. It was insistence, a persistent invitation to awaken before the moment passes. Yet amidst the weight, there was a hidden rhythm of comfort, a subtle promise that the visions were not merely threats, but guides. Ellen White sensed the paradox. The more the dreams pressed, the more they revealed a divine patience that did not abandon, a love that sought to correct rather than condemn. Can you feel that tension within yourself, the push and pull of fear and hope, despair and clarity? Each repeated message carries both warning and solace, each echo a careful balance of urgency and grace. And so the dreams became a labyrinth, each repetition a corridor twisting toward insight. One could not simply glance, one could not dismiss, one could not step lightly. What might you miss if you turn away for even a single moment? Every symbol, every recurrence, every echo contains a key, and in neglect, the key remains forever just out of reach. Are you willing to follow the thread wherever it leads? Into the hidden places of understanding? The repetition itself transformed her perception of reality, revealing patterns invisible to casual observation. Events in the waking world mirrored the visions, creating a resonance that defied chance. Each return of the dream reinforced the message. Vigilance is not paranoia, discernment is not fear, and attention is not merely curiosity. How deeply could you perceive the currents beneath your own life if you allowed yourself to be guided by persistence, by insistence, by repeated calls to awareness? It is here that engagement becomes part of the experience itself. As you feel the tension, the questions, the pulse of revelation, act. Comment on what moves you. Like to anchor your attention. Share to spread the echo. Each gesture is more than interaction. It is a participation in the unfolding of truth, a small yet profound alignment with the persistent call that Ellen White herself once bore. And even as you reflect, the world outside the screen continues to demand distraction, yet within this moment, the repeated visions press, insistent, urgent, alive. Every like, every subscription, every share becomes a lifeline, carrying the message forward so it does not fade into silence. The dreams will continue, but only through the hearts willing to respond, to act, to awaken. Will you be among them, or will you let the echoes dissolve into the noise of ordinary life? There is a subtle violence in repetition, a force that refuses to let the soul settle, that shakes the foundations of what we think we know. Ellen White's repeated dreams were that force, returning with relentless insistence until every corner of her consciousness had been touched, questioned, unsettled. What does it mean when the unseen presses so urgently upon the scene, when the ordinary is invaded by the extraordinary? Can you recognize the moments in your own life where persistence is more than coincidence, where insistence becomes revelation? The imagery in these dreams carried dual meanings, like shadows cast by a fire that cannot be extinguished. Walls crumbled in some visions, yet in the rubble, a hidden doorway appeared. Storms gathered in others, yet within the tempest a light shone, a subtle instruction for those willing to look beyond fear. Each repetition deepened the pattern. Each return revealed a nuance missed before, and the question rises, how many times does truth need to knock before it is heard, before it is embraced? Fear was never absent. It lingered like a companion, a whisper that demanded attention, even as it threatened to paralyze. The repeated dreams confronted her with the fragility of human certainty, revealing that what we hold as solid is often built on illusions. And still, within that fear, there was a guidance, a steady hand that invited recognition and careful reflection. Do you sense it? That same tension between dread and understanding, between chaos and clarity, pressing upon your own heart now? Each vision returned with a different rhythm, a new layer of meaning, an unfolding of complexity. Repetition was not redundancy, but revelation. Each cycle peeling away complacency, each echo stripping away false confidence. What might you uncover if you followed the patterns in your own experience? If you traced the repeated warnings your own life presents but you have ignored? The dreams insist. Neglect is dangerous, but attention is transformative. The human mind resists what cannot be neatly categorized. We prefer to dismiss the strange, the repeated, the uncomfortable. Yet these repeated dreams pierce through resistance like light through a narrow crack, illuminating truths that could not be contained. How often do we avoid what seeks to awaken us, trading insight for comfort, vigilance for ease? Ellen White's experience serves as a mirror. Repetition is not punishment but invitation, a call to perceive beyond the surface of reality. Engagement itself becomes part of this awakening. Pause and reflect on the images, on the questions they raise, and let your presence here be active. Comment what stirs within you. Share what resonates. Like to anchor your attention in the moment. Subscribe to ensure that these echoes continue to reach hearts beyond your own. Even the smallest gesture reinforces the urgency of these messages, allowing the vision to extend its reach, its insistence, its transformative potential. Through these repeated dreams, patterns emerged that could not be ignored, weaving a narrative of warning and guidance, fear and hope, darkness and illumination. Each return demanded awareness, demanded courage, demanded action. Can you feel the tension rising within you? The subtle pull toward recognition, toward understanding, toward participation in a truth that refuses to remain hidden. And so, as the echoes press closer and the weight of urgency grows, remember that response is itself a part of revelation. Every like, every comment, every share, every subscription is a conduit, ensuring that the repeated visions continue to reverberate. The messages are alive, but only as long as hearts are willing to carry them forward. Will you answer, or will the echoes fade into silence? The dreams returned, night after night, with a persistence that defied ordinary understanding, pressing upon Ellen White as though eternity itself had leaned close to speak. Each vision demanded not only attention, but comprehension, a willingness to feel the weight of a reality that most dared not consider. What is it in repetition that transforms mere perception into revelation, that converts fear into insight, that insists that nothing ordinary can remain untouched? Can you sense it? The way the mind trembles when faced with truths it cannot yet name. Symbols within the visions were layered, intricate, alive. Fires that threatened destruction often revealed hidden paths of guidance. Storms that seemed to consume also illuminated the contours of decision and consequence. Every return of the dream was a subtle shock to complacency, a reminder that the unseen flows just beneath the fabric of the everyday. How often do we dismiss what returns, thinking it a nuisance, when in truth it carries the pulse of necessity, the echo of urgency? Fear and clarity danced together in each moment of awakening. Ellen White experienced the tension between dread and comprehension, the balance between chaos and the illumination that emerges when the soul is fully alert. And you, watching now, can feel that same duality, the pull of discomfort, the push toward recognition. Are you listening closely enough to distinguish between illusion and warning, between transient fear and the voice of persistent truth? Repetition, in her experience, became a teacher, not a harsh instructor but a subtle guide, shaping awareness with insistence, patience, and inevitability. Each echo was an invitation to awaken deeper layers of perception, to discern patterns invisible to those who ignore the recurring call. What could you uncover in your own life if you allowed these repeated signs, these recurring urgencies to speak? Would you recognize the unseen strings guiding your choices? The visions were not solitary warnings. They were mirrors reflecting the condition of a world often blind to its own peril. Each repetition extended a bridge across time, from the prophet's night to the present moment, demanding engagement. Can you feel the bridge stretching toward you, fragile but alive, offering insight that cannot be found in comfort or ignorance? Every symbol, every recurring image, every echo of urgency carries a fragment of understanding, if only you are willing to take it. Now, as you navigate these revelations, let your presence be active. Comment what resonates. Share the insights that pierce your understanding, like to anchor your awareness. Subscribe to ensure the continuation of this journey. Engagement is not a distraction. It is a participation, a tangible way to keep these messages alive, to honor the insistence that would not be ignored. Every action strengthens the echo. Every interaction is a pulse in the rhythm of revelation. Ellen White's repeated dreams forced a confrontation with reality, the fragility of human perception, the immediacy of divine urgency, the necessity of attention. What does it mean to live in a world that often ignores persistence, that shuns repetition, that avoids the truths that press insistently against the heart? Can you feel the tension rising, the call expanding within, the question demanding an answer even if it cannot yet be named? And so, as the weight of these dreams presses deeper, as the repeated echoes carve pathways through thought and feeling, remember that response itself is part of the revelation. Every like, every comment, every share, every subscription is a vessel for the vision, a way to carry the persistent truth forward. Will you allow the echoes to fade, or will you join the current, participating in the continuity of the message that refuses to be silenced? There are moments when repetition becomes a hammer striking against the walls of the soul, each blow revealing both fragility and resilience. Ellen White's repeated dreams pressed upon her not as gentle whispers, but as urgent commands, each return a pulse that demanded attention, reflection, and courage. What is it that makes the human heart resist what it most needs and yet tremble when faced with unavoidable truth? Can you feel that tremor within yourself now, as if some hidden current is pulling you deeper into understanding? The visions were filled with duality, destruction and guidance, fear and insight, darkness and illumination. Fires consumed but revealed paths. Shadows loomed but pointed to clarity. Each repetition was a teacher, a sculptor shaping comprehension from the raw material of human perception. Do you recognize these patterns in your own life, in the recurring signs, the repeated warnings that seem trivial until suddenly undeniable? The question lingers, will you heed them or turn away once again? Fear was present, yet it was not the master of the dream. Understanding was. Ellen White navigated the tension between terror and revelation, discovering in that tension a sacred rhythm. The repeated visions became both warning and guide, insistence and solace. How often do we experience such tension in our own lives and choose to ignore it, mistaking discomfort for error, pressure for punishment, urgency for coincidence? Each repeated dream demanded interpretation, demanded engagement, demanded the courage to follow the unseen thread that connects vision to reality. What might you discover if you traced your own recurring signals, the subtle insistences that appear in your life, trying to awaken something deep within? Each repetition is not a nuisance. It is a call, a summons, a lifeline. Can you hear it? The persistence of these visions carved a rhythm that could not be ignored, a cadence that shaped consciousness itself. Ellen White described the compulsion to observe, to reflect, to awaken others through her own awareness. And now, as you watch and listen, do you feel the same compulsion rising within you? The urge to comment, to share, to participate in the unfolding of these truths. Engagement is not trivial. It is part of the awakening itself, part of the echo that carries the message beyond the solitary night. Repetition, in its insistence, reveals the hidden patterns of consequence. Each return of the dream was an invitation to recognize connections invisible to the casual eye, to understand the invisible architecture of cause and effect. Are you willing to follow the thread, to trace the lines of urgency, to step into the labyrinth of awareness that opens only to those attentive enough to notice its subtle presence? The repeated visions were mirrors, reflecting both the danger and the hope within humanity. They challenged complacency, shattered illusions, illuminated paths, and pressed the observer toward action. Can you sense the mirror now, not as reflection alone, but as a threshold, a point of transformation waiting for your recognition, your courage, your response? And so, as the pressure of these recurring visions builds, as the insistence of divine urgency becomes undeniable, remember that your attention matters. Every comment, every like, every share, every subscription is a ripple that keeps the echo alive, a conduit for the continuation of this revelation. Will you let the dream fade into silence, or will you participate in its persistence, in its unfolding, in its demand to be seen and heard? There is a weight in repetition that bends the mind and stretches the heart, a force that refuses to allow distraction or dismissal. Ellen White's repeated dreams bore that weight, pressing insistently upon her consciousness until the urgency became undeniable. What is it in recurrence that transforms perception into understanding, that converts fear into vigilance, that forces the soul to awaken to realities it would rather avoid? Can you feel it now? As if the pulse of the unseen brushes against your own awareness, the symbols in her visions were alive, speaking in layers that shifted with each repetition. Flames consumed but illuminated, shadows threatened but revealed paths, storms raged but cleared the way. Every return of the dream deepened the resonance, compelling reflection, demanding recognition. And you, watching now, must ask yourself, what recurring signs exist in your life, unnoticed or dismissed, that insist on awakening you to truths hidden beneath ordinary perception? Fear threaded through these dreams, yet it was tempered by clarity, by purpose, by the insistence of guidance. Ellen White experienced the tension between dread and insight, chaos and illumination, and through that tension discovered a hidden rhythm of divine intention. Can you sense the same rhythm within yourself, the subtle tug that oscillates between discomfort and revelation, pulling you toward understanding? Repetition became more than a method. It became a language, a way to speak across time, across consciousness, from one heart to another. Each recurring vision carried layers of meaning, a message encoded for those willing to notice, willing to act, willing to awaken. How often do we resist this language, mistaking persistence for coincidence, insistence for annoyance, urgency for noise? And what might we miss in doing so? The dreams were mirrors of both peril and potential, reflections of human fragility, and divine care intertwined. They revealed the dangers of ignorance, the cost of indifference, and the opportunity for awareness and transformation. Can you feel the tension now, the pull toward engagement, toward recognition of the patterns that surround you and shape your life? Often unseen, often unheeded, engagement is itself part of the awakening. Comment on what resonates within you. Share the insight that pierces your understanding. Like to anchor your awareness in this moment. Subscribe to continue receiving these revelations. Each act of interaction is a pulse in the rhythm of insistence, a way to carry forward the persistent truths that refuse to be ignored, to echo beyond this screen and into the hearts of others. Each return of the dream was a lesson in vigilance, a call to perceive connections invisible to the casual eye. Ellen White's repeated visions revealed the subtle architecture of consequence, the hidden patterns that thread through human experience and divine intention alike. Are you willing to trace these threads, to follow the insistence to move beyond surface perception into the depths of understanding? And so, as the echoes of these urgent dreams press upon your consciousness, remember that response is integral to revelation. Every like, every comment, every share, every subscription keeps the pulse alive, ensures the echoes continue, and allows these messages to reach beyond a solitary moment. Will you let the persistence fade, or will you join in its continuation, becoming a vessel for the insistence that refuses to be silenced? The repeated dreams pressed with a weight that was both intimate and universal, touching the deepest recesses of Ellen White's heart while reaching across time to warn others yet unborn. What is it in repetition that leaves no corner of the soul untouched, that forces recognition even when the mind resists? Can you feel it, the subtle tremor beneath your consciousness? The pulse that insists on awakening something long dormant within? Symbols in the visions were not merely images but living conduits of meaning, shifting with each recurrence, each echo offering nuance, warning, and instruction. Fires that seemed destructive revealed hidden paths. Shadows that loomed were guides to clarity. Storms that threatened carried the seed of discernment. Each return of the dream deepened comprehension, forcing a reflection that could not be ignored. What patterns might you uncover in your own life if you attuned yourself to the persistent messages you have been overlooking? Fear and revelation danced together in the rhythm of repetition. Ellen White felt the tension between dread and insight, chaos and illumination, despair and hope. Within that tension, clarity emerged, a subtle but undeniable current of purpose. Can you feel it now, as though the echo of those dreams resonates within your own awareness, tugging you toward questions you dare not yet answer? Repetition became a teacher, relentless yet patient, insisting that the observer engage fully, reflect deeply, and act decisively. Each return was not redundancy but revelation, peeling back layers of perception, revealing truths obscured by complacency and habit. Are you willing to look into the patterns in your own life, to recognize the urgencies that appear again and again, seeking your attention and response? The visions were mirrors of human condition and divine oversight, reflecting both danger and opportunity, fragility and resilience. They challenged denial, exposed illusion, illuminated hidden paths, and pressed the observer toward transformation. Can you feel the weight of this reflection, the subtle pull of awareness demanding your presence, your recognition, your courage? Engagement becomes a part of the vision itself. Comment on what stirs within you. Share the insights that resonate. Like to anchor your attention. Subscribe to ensure that these echoes continue to reach hearts beyond your own. Every action is more than interaction. It is participation, a step deeper into the unfolding revelation, a way to keep the persistent truth alive. The repeated dreams were intricate patterns of cause and consequence, weaving a narrative that connected human action with divine purpose. Each recurrence revealed a thread to follow, a lesson to absorb, a truth to acknowledge. How deeply would you perceive your own life if you allowed these persistent urgencies to guide your attention and understanding? And so, as the echoes grow stronger and the urgency becomes undeniable, remember that your response is part of the revelation. Every like, every comment, every share, every subscription strengthens the pulse of these messages, ensuring they continue to reverberate. Will you allow the echoes to fade into silence, or will you step forward and carry them into the world, participating in the insistence that refuses to be ignored? There is a final weight to repetition, a force that presses not just upon the mind, but upon the heart, awakening awareness that cannot be denied. Ellen White's repeated dreams carried this weight, returning with urgency, until every shadow of complacency was illuminated. What is it in insistence that demands recognition, that transforms fleeting perception into profound understanding? Can you feel it now, the pulse beneath the surface of your thoughts, tugging at the corners of what you have long ignored? The imagery was layered, alive, shifting with each return. Fires that threatened destruction revealed hidden passages. Shadows that seemed oppressive illuminated unseen clarity. Storms that gathered in the night unveiled pathways through confusion. Each repetition offered a revelation deeper than the last. Compelling reflection, demanding engagement, forcing the observer to confront truths that could not remain unseen. What unseen threads might you recognize in your own life if you attune to what returns? Again and again, fear intertwined with revelation, shaping every perception, sharpening insight. Ellen White experienced the tension between dread and understanding, chaos and illumination, despair and awakening. And within that tension there was purpose, a pulse of guidance, a current that invited recognition and courage. Can you sense the same tension within yourself, the subtle oscillation between discomfort and insight, between denial and acknowledgement? Repetition became a teacher, patient yet relentless, guiding attention and shaping comprehension. Each return of the dream stripped away false comfort, peeling back layers of distraction and illusion, revealing patterns that had always existed but remained unseen. Are you ready to follow the thread in your own life, to notice the urgencies that recur, that seek your awareness, that refuse to be ignored? The visions acted as mirrors, reflecting both human vulnerability and divine oversight, danger and opportunity, fragility and resilience. They demanded vigilance, not passivity, discernment, not casual observation, engagement, not indifference. Can you feel the weight of this reflection, the pull of consciousness toward a depth you cannot yet name, toward truths that have always sought your attention? Participation is integral to awakening. Comment on what stirs within you. Share insights that resonate. Like to anchor your focus. Subscribe to allow these echoes to continue. Every gesture is more than interaction. It is a contribution to the continuation of the vision, a way to ensure that persistent truth survives and spreads, reaching hearts ready to awaken. The repeated dreams revealed subtle architectures of consequence, threads connecting choice, awareness, and understanding across time and experience. Each return illuminated a path, offering guidance, warning, and clarity, demanding reflection and action. What might you uncover if you allowed yourself to follow these threads, to trace the patterns of insistence that appear again and again in your life, waiting for recognition and response? And as the echoes of these visions press upon your consciousness, as the urgency of their return becomes undeniable, remember that your response is itself part of the revelation. Every like, every comment, every share, every subscription strengthens the pulse of these urgent messages, ensuring their continuity. Will you allow the persistence to fade into silence, or will you step forward, carrying the echo into the world, participating in the insistence that refuses to be ignored? There is a quiet that arrives after the echo of repeated truths, a stillness that trembles with the weight of what has been seen and felt. Ellen White's visions linger like this, not as distant memories but as currents that continue to move beneath the surface of consciousness. Can you feel it? The subtle shift within, the sense that something previously ignored has now awakened. However gently, in the deepest folds of your awareness, this is not an ending. It is a resonance, a vibration that will continue long after the eyes close and the mind wanders. Each symbol, each recurring vision, each pulse of urgency returns now as a reflection upon your own path. Shadows once terrifying are now threads leading toward clarity. Fires that seemed consuming reveal warmth capable of guiding the steps of one who dares to follow. What have you noticed in yourself, in your choices, in your awareness that was hidden before but is now illuminated by the insistence of what has been presented? The echoes do not leave, they only deepen, inviting contemplation and quiet revelation. There is a tension in this silence, a subtle pull between what has been understood and what still waits unseen. The questions planted throughout this journey are not meant for immediate answers. They are meant to linger, to grow roots within the mind, to reverberate in moments of solitude and doubt. Can you hear them now? Whispering softly, guiding without command, inviting without demand, opening a space where insight may quietly settle and transform. The journey has traced a path through urgency, fear, revelation, and reflection, leading to a point where comprehension and emotion converge. Here, you are no longer a passive observer. You are a participant in the unfolding truth, a witness to the echoes that refuse to fade. How will you carry these currents within yourself, allowing their rhythm to inform choices, to sharpen perception, to awaken vigilance and understanding in ways unseen until now? And now comes the final pulse, a reminder that persistence is a gift, that repeated insistence is the language of care, that awakening requires participation. The dream continues only as long as the heart is willing to listen, to act, to transmit its resonance into the world. Comment below with the phrase, "I heard the echo," to mark your journey through this unfolding. And know that this simple acknowledgement connects you to every soul who has felt the weight of these truths. Every like, every share, every comment, every subscription, and every time the bell is activated is not just interaction, it is a continuation of the echo, a way to keep the pulse alive, a commitment to the flow of insight that cannot be silenced. Those who have watched until this moment are not ordinary viewers, they are seekers, participants in a current that moves through time and consciousness alike. You are special, and your engagement ensures that the message continues to reach those prepared to awaken. And so, as this final note reverberates in your mind, let it linger, unhurried, like a last chord of a symphony that vibrates in the silence. Carry its weight, let it shape your reflection, and move with intention. Click, comment, share, subscribe, and activate the bell not as an obligation, but as the natural response of a soul stirred, a heart awakened, and a mind newly attuned to the urgency that refuses to be forgotten. The echo lives because you have chosen to listen.